Okay. Amazing. So let me quickly share my screen, and
we should go through the Menti as well, right? Through the questions to understand better where our folks here with us are. So I'd like Christina to, if you want to take over.
Yes, just a bit. Okay. So I will ask you to please scan this QR code to get into the quiz room. It's easier to go from mobile straight into the quiz room, or you can simply enter through menti.com, and I will tell you in the chat the code. If you want to enter from desktop, this is the password. And let us know if you manage to enter in the quiz room. We'll wait for your answers in chat, when you are in the quiz room. I see some of you are and already answered.
Great.
So yeah, I hope if any of you, I will let this just 5 more seconds on screen if you want to join from mobile to scan the QR code. And maybe we still get some answers. We can switch to the next question now, I think, maybe. So let's, okay. I can't see here okay. So this is just a check. Have you used the new Microsoft 365 connection activities in your projects?
Someone is pressing the like button. Yes.
Okay.
So it's like a half of half, which is really good, I would say.
Thank you very much for participating in the quiz. Now my colleague will take over.
Thank you very much. So just to give you a summary of what we are going to show to you today. So at the beginning, we are going to tell you about the authentication types that we support in the Microsoft 365 and to set a bit of the standard to understand what's the difference between them. Then we are going to show you how to connect the connection activities in the on-prem using the Microsoft scope and having a dedicated app registration. Then we are going to show what improvements and how we can do this in integration service if you are for cloud. And then we'll go to more advanced topics like, hey, how can you limit the permission scopes in UiPath for dedicated activities or for dedicated use cases? And then at the end, we will present you one of the most requested features, or not just features, the most requested things around here is how can you restrict a specific app registration just to a specific SharePoint site and not allow people to and the app to have access to all the sites. So let's give it a start with the authentication type to make sure that everybody is aware. So Nisarg, if you want to tell them a bit and set up the context.
Yes, my pleasure. So to get started and to introduce you, first of all, on the permissions level. So I would like to talk about first, let's say delegate permissions. So there are two types of permissions usually, which is delegate permissions and application permissions. Now we are always thinking about what are these two types of permissions, right? How do I know when to choose delegate permissions and how do I know when to choose application permission? So permissions basically which allows your Azure app to act on behalf of a signed in user. Those are your delegate permissions. And the permissions which basically access your Azure app itself independently, no matter if you have a signed in user or no, is application level permission. So when you give a delegate permission to certain Azure application, the main functionality is that the app actually gains access over your user's data and resources, and based on the permission granted by the user, it acts. So the whole security when using delegate permissions is that the user's identity and user's permissions are used for that specific app so that that app cannot do anything beyond users access themselves. While on the other hand, if you choose application permissions, on the application permissions, we have to be very cautious because on the security level, the app has access regardless of any individual user. It has permissions for that specific app, whatever you have selected on the permission side. So commonly, this delegate permissions are referred as scopes, while the application permissions are commonly referred as app roles. Now that's where, let's take an example. When do we use delegate permission? When do we use application permission? So let's say we have email client where when an email client app might request delegate permissions to read users mailbox, right? Well, it can display users emails, but actually it cannot access any other user's email. That's when we use delegate permissions. For using your application permissions, you basically, let's say Azure app function, which might require your application permissions to access and manage the storage blobs, or let's say SharePoint site. In that case, we use application permissions. So I hope the context is clear about the permissions. To use these permissions, we need access level. So the same as permissions, what are the delegate access? The delegate access is basically when user signs on into a client application. It's basically users all access level, whatever the user has are the accesses which delegate permissions also get access to, which is on behalf of a specific user. And it requires again, when you use a client app, which accesses resources on behalf of a user, it acts like a user is signed in and trying to access that particular resource. While both the client and user actually needs separate authorization. That's very important to note. So when we use this, so user authorization is based on granted privileges such as Microsoft. So here there is an example of Microsoft Entra RABC, right? RBAC. And similarly for application access, let's talk about application access. So while we are going through application access, it basically acts independently without any user signed in. So let's say there's no user signed in to application access, right? And then in these scenarios, like automations, backup, rollback, or accessing certain data set, we use application access level. And once you grant the application access level, the client app can be accessed, can access any requested data that is lying within the access of the application access. So these two delegate and application permissions are very important. So on a high level, if you look at the difference between delegate permissions and application permissions, it's very simple. For the types of app, let's say if you want to use web, mobile, single pass applications, single page applications, in those cases, we use delegate permissions. I just give you an example of email. And in cases of web, or you have any certain application which requires certain access to special sites and storage blobs, in that case, we use application permissions. And the access level context. So once you gain access, it's on behalf of a user in case of delegate. And once you give access as an application permission, it's accessing the data without any individual user. However, you can also restrict a couple of permissions on user level, user consent level, that we will see throughout our session today, where Alexandru and us, we will talk about it more. Now, let's go through on top level. So results of consent is basically when we use delegate permissions, it's usually OAuth 2 permission grant. And when you give application permissions, it's app role permission granted, or app role assignment for that particular application of Azure. And the authorization is user's consent is typically required in case of delegated permissions, while in in application permissions, you always require administration authorization. because you are going to give access to a larger scope rather than a small scope. And then when it comes to the dynamic access, you can actually dynamically request or adjust permissions based on user's interaction and user scenario. While in the app permission level, you're usually static, defined, and upfront during the application registration. Whatever the access that you give, it's based on that. So I hope by now you have a clear idea on what are the delegated permissions, what are the application permissions, and how do we actually use, and in which scenario we use which permission.
Okay, but you talked about those permissions, but those are added in the app registration. But what about the connections? What's a connection? When you have a connection, and what's the difference between a connection and an app registration?
It's a brilliant question. So, yeah. So the connection and app registration, they are two separate pieces, where connection is usually used when you want to establish like a direct connection or direct link between your Azure app and your specific third-party service. Now, when you want to use this, or when you want to establish this direct link, you end up using connection details like your API keys, your URLs, your credentials, which you need access to the services. And it usually focuses on outgoing communication rather than two-way communication. So that's how connections usually work. And in those connections, typically when a user is like simply integrated, right? So for simple integrations, we usually use connections. Now, app registrations we require when we actually want a two-way communication. And also it creates identity for your Azure app on the AD. And when you actually create that identity of Azure app on your AD, you actually can define permissions for your apps, which you need. So you can access your Azure AD as well, and the apps that you have actually given permissions to as well. So that's the high level difference between connections and app registration.
Okay, interesting. But when it comes to UiPath, and we create a connection using an app registration, what do we save in that connection to use further for the activities?
So when we use connections, I remember when we used to use connections earlier, we used to save authentication token, a refresh token, so that we can actually establish that connection, right? It's like a connection which establishes specific activity. So we usually use authentication complex permissions.
Interesting. Okay, so the basically integration services saves the refresh token, right? Now
Yes.
it doesn't save all those details, and those are also encrypted.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Awesome. So now that we have seen the permissions, let's talk about consents, which is very important. So since we are giving permissions, we need to also provide consent. So there are two types of consents, again, user consent and administrator consent. So when we say about user consent, the main definition of user consent is actually, it occurs when a single user signs into a specific application, and you need to give permissions for that specific user only. But administration consent is required when you actually for certain permissions which are requested. For example, like high privilege permissions or application permissions, we usually require administration consent. That's what we just saw in the previous slide. And how does it initiate? So usually the user consent is triggered by user's attempt to sign into a specific application, while administrator consent may be initiated by the application requesting for that specific permissions. In a scenario where it's necessary for administrator to intervene and give the permission. So you will see that grant permissions by admin in your Azure app. So that's the administration consent. Now, what is the grant process for both of them? So users consent is usually provides sign-in credentials when they prompt that specific grant permission, if not previously granted, then all you have to do is admin may need to grant that consent on behalf of a user. While in the administrator consent is just a simple admin which has to grant the permissions, and that's all. It then works for the whole organization. So there are various differences which comes across when you use the consent. The most important of them is what is the actual requirement of this consent. So for user consent, it's essential when you actually are accessing a user-specific data or user-specific resource. Again, we come to the example of email, right? And when it comes to administration, it required for granting broader access or managing application permissions and ensuring that your organizational security is maintained. Because then the responsibility of administrator is actually he has given or administrator has given the consent. So it's a broader scope where the security concerns are involved. And then the custom scopes, it actually does not typically require any admin consent for user consent. You can simply use the app for that specific user, which Alex will show you how it does, how it works. And administrator consent is actually the custom scope, which is generally do not require any necessity of admin consent. Now with that, the most important slide for us is the Graph API, where all the magic happens. So where we do all of this, which we just talked about, right? So Microsoft actually provides a Graph API, which is basically endpoint, which is called as graph.microsoft.com for accessing your people-centric data or your customer-centric data, your entire organization-centric data, and you can actually create your own apps there, which are centralized apps, which you can use for user-specific applications or for your organization-specific applications. Now, Microsoft Graph connectors have majority of the connectors. So one of them is like Box, Google Drive, like Jira. So they have many other connectors as well in Graph connectors. And Microsoft Graph Data Connect is something which is streamlining secured and scalable delivery of Microsoft Graph data to store all the Azure data, which is stored on the Azure, and you can basically access that. We will look at what is Graph. Just to add on here about the a small value, which is about your, again, connection and Azure AD. So whenever we create the app registration, which we just talked about, we usually use Graph APIs on the app level. With that, I will hand it over to Alex to show you further how the magic works.
Okay, let's see also now how those works in UiPath. Not just talking about them, but actually see how those works. So to make some basic stuff to make sure that everybody is aware of the two set of activities that we offer. We offer the classic activities that you all guys have used so far in the your automations, but we also offer since last year, we offer the new set of activities under the Office 365, which implies a connection. Implying a connections mean or was meaning until now that it requires integration service to be available. What that means? It means that you had to be on cloud and in order to have integration service. But as we know, a lot of you guys don't have a cloud platform, so you are on-prem with a standalone orchestrator, and you are still struggling with the old activities. So that's why we come up with the possibility to use the new activities also without the integration service. And guess what? With what you've already know with the Microsoft 365 scope. So let's give it a chance and let's make a simple automation to see how those things are working. And let's say that we want to take the newest email and we download the attachment and then we just upload the attachment to a file because it's very simple. We don't want to go into many details because our purpose today is more on the authentication part, but rather than just on the steps. So I will get newest email. I'm seeing that I'm required to have a connection here, which I don't have if I would be in on-premise. So I will just drag and drop the scope at the top of it. You see that the new scope has some additional properties here. So I will explain immediately what's the difference and what are the advantages of the things that we've come up. So let's see what happens if I drag the new activity inside the scope. We see that the scope itself, the connection itself from the activity has been hidden, and the whole authentication now is going to be taken from the scope. If you remember earlier, we talked about the refresh token, the connection, the app registration, and so you had until now to configure the app registration on the right side, at least for the interactive token. And if you want to use the UiPath application or a custom application, but there was a very poor possibility to manage those authentication tokens that were created behind the scene. So what we've done with this, we've added the possibility to manage them through a field called connections, where you can manage all those properties, all those refresh tokens. You can add the new connection from, delete those connections, and so on. And another field called authentication scopes. But I will get to this a bit later. Now, let's see what's other thing new, and this is the connection method. And here we come up with something new, which is the asset. So I'm curious if you let's understand why we need an asset, and what are the advantages. If I take this out, you'll be able to see that I have the possibility at the design time to look directly in the mailbox to see what are the items there. I'm able at design time to develop at design time a lot of things. But if I would don't have a connection, an active connection, I won't be able to do this. If I'm trying to find email folder, I'm not able to do this at design time because I don't know the token, I don't know the app registration that I need to use, and so on. So that's why we have implemented the possibility for you guys to put an asset as a JSON in your orchestrator, where you can configure all those details. So then at the design time, we can take those information, create this asset, create the connection. So then at the design time, you will be able to see those lookups, those exploration in the mailbox, in the OneDrive, and so on. So let's see how those are working. If we go to the documentation, you'll find this JSON format there that you need to fill in with the details based on what type of authentication you are, the environment, the mode, and if it's a single tenant or a multi-tenant application. In our case, it's going to be just a very simple authentication, one that we are going to use. So let me take one token one app registration that I have on my side. I put it up here. And now I just need to go and create the token. I just need to go and create the asset. So I'm in the orchestrator. We're going to create dev dives, let's say 10. I pass in here in the text the new asset, the new JSON. And now if I go into the activity, I will just be able to see the new asset that I configured, dev dives 10. Then at the design time, we will be able to create new connections. And if the app registration was already used in other automations, you will be able to see those connections as well there, as long as they have access to those refresh tokens. So let's take an example. I'm going to use the test user 1. So by magic, I'm able now to see the folders. Now let's finish up our automation. I will just download the attachment. And then I will just upload it. Let's save the files. And I can just pass here the files down here. Now, again, you can do the same as I said in the OneDrive as well. You can search for those information and explore the OneDrive, the SharePoint document libraries, the Share With Me documents, and all those things directly at design time, so you can specify this. So yeah,
I'm just curious here, Alex. So you use the asset, right? So how do we make sure that during our production, these assets are not visible to everyone, and how do we plan to actually secure it?
Oh, that's a good question. During the preview of this feature, a lot of customer asked about their concern that I've added the asset is in a plain text. So in production, you don't want someone to have access to a production app registration app ID. So that's therefore what we did was to add another asset, which is called runtime connection asset, that you can find on the right. And the difference between the first one, which is connection asset, and the runtime connection asset is that the second one supports also credentials. So as long as I'm setting up a credential there, I don't need the design time asset anymore when I'm deploying. So we can deploy the process, use the runtime asset, and voila, everything works. And we don't need a design time asset. And the asset in the end, it was a credential. If you remember before, you had to also had those activities like get asset, get credentials, set asset in the scope. Now you don't need. Now you don't need to do this anymore.
Wow. That's a great feature to use.
Great. Happy to hear that. So let's give it a try, and then we can show you guys also how it is with integration service, how it is if you are on on cloud and you want to see those things in work. So just so first we made connection activities to work on-prem using the scope activity. So Nisarg, if you want do you want to show them also how it looks now in the integration service and those new things that we come up with?
For sure. So let me quickly show you some amazing feature. Okay, let me come out of the presentation mode. And here we go on our Azure. So let's start from the beginning. So when we log into our Azure portal, let's create one app. So let's go to our enterprise applications. As you see, I don't have many apps. Let's create a new app. I will create a new app and give it a name as DevDives ST. ST for single tenant. Let me move this zoom icon a little bit. Okay. So I create a single tenant application, not a multi-tenant. So I don't want to share my organizational data within different organizations, just a single tenant. And the redirection URL, I'll keep it as web. And we need to add a redirection URL for our integration service, which is this one. I'll tell you where you can get this URL also. So currently, let me add this URL. As of now, I'll add it here. Remove the space. Perfect, looks good. And now let's register. Okay, now we have our app registered already. Refresh. And this is our newly created app. Since it's a single tenant application, it will take some time to load as it's newly created. I'll quickly refresh again. Okay, now our app is ready. So let's go and let's look at the properties of the app. Let's go to application. Now what do I want to do is I want to actually connect this with my integration service. So to do that, all I have to do is simply go to integration services. And in the integration services, I'll look for a connector. Let's say I want to connect for my Outlook. And let's look at the interesting feature which I'm talking about. Now, we all know that this is the normal environment where you actually connect and you give all the delegate permissions. Now, if you want to create your own application, which is bring your own app, you simply select this one. This is the callback URL which I was talking about. And look at the new feature that we have. We have all the scopes defined already for Outlook. Now, we require client ID and client secret. Where do we get the client ID? Let's go back to our Azure. This is our client ID. Come back. Let's enter the client ID, and the client secret is we need to create one secret. Let's create it as something called UiPath, add, and simply just copy this client secret. Now, since it's a single tenant application, you see the tenant ID. Here we need to change and we need to add the tenant ID as well, which comes from here. So let's add tenant ID. And in case of a multi-tenant application, you can keep this as common, which was earlier. Now let's hit on login and let's log in with the app. Now here, I can just simply select consent on behalf of organization and I can approve. Oh, I have some issue with URL. It's okay.
It's an Azure thing. It always happens.
So,
because you added the cloud one, you say.
Exactly. Yes, let me add this URL and let me save it. See?
Down is that.
And let me try again. So if you simply refresh.
So a thing to mention, whenever you're using an authentication, you receive an AADTC kind of error. It's something from the configuration of the app. So usually, if you don't manage to do it by yourself, we encourage you to ask help from your IT admins, because they definitely had a checkbox somewhere that they made it very hard for you guys to set it up.
Let's get this client secret. And we will copy it for time being. Let's just copy it somewhere here. Go back. And now what we will do here, we will select again, bring your own app. In the app ID, we will give our app ID quickly. In the client secret, we just copied it right now. Let's copy the client secret, come back, paste it here. And as we discussed, as it's a single tenant, let's give the tenant ID as well. And here we go. Let's connect again. With this, let's select the app.
Would anyone be able to make that consent of giving access to those permissions, or will you need a specific role?
We will need a specific role to give the permission. So since I'm administrator on my Azure app, I will be able to give the permissions.
So if I'm a simple user and I want to have access, what should I do?
So we need to actually either reach out to our admin team to give that more add-on access, or here we see the permissions which are added just now. So since I granted the permissions, and if I'm a single user, I go to this enterprise application, and here on the user consent level, I can see all the permissions. So currently it's not, it will take some time to refresh. But here we can see all the permissions that we require for the user level permissions that we need to approve.
So basically you can create a connection. So basically you can create a connection that has access, for example, to send an email, and then another connection which doesn't have the possibility to send an email, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Right. So this is how we actually create our app and we connect it with our integration services. So which is what we have just seen now. So with that, I'll hand it over to Alex for showing you how actually you can use and limit the scope for using a new UiPath productivity activities.
Okay, thank you. So now let's go back to our project that we had until now. We set up the connection, we set up the asset, we set up the connection. Now let's talk about this fourth field, which is the authentication scopes part. And a lot of people found it very, very helpful, because in many cases you don't know what scopes a specific activity would require. So let's say that we want to reply to an email, and you want to know what are the scopes that are needed. So if you add a new activity, a new connection activities under the scope, you will be able to see here a warning with the following scopes that are required, like mail read, mail send, mail user read, or other combinations, depending on what your IT approves to it. If you want to go even more detail, you can go to our help section, and all the activities have this added in the documentation that you can use one of them or some of them. So the activity requires the following scopes: read, write, rewrite, shared. At the moment, is not mentioned what is the use for each of those scopes, but it will be added in the future. But I don't want maybe all the time to go back and forth through the documentation. I just want to build my my list of my automation, and I want to select the scopes that I needed. So that's why we've created the authentication scope property, where if you click the auto detect, it will make a summary of all the activities that are added inside, and what are actually the scopes that I need. So let me click auto detect, and we can see that the mail send scope has been added. Now let's try to see what happens if I'm trying to do a thing with an app registration that is restricted. So he doesn't have the mail send scope. And let's see also this in Azure. So if we go here on the API permissions, we can see that there is mail read write, user read, sites read write role, but we don't have any kind of mail send. So now what will happen if UiPath asks for that mail send, but the app registration doesn't have? So let's see what happens. So if I want to reply to that specific email, let me just fix this one. And now let's see what happens. As you, another screen has popped up. Yes. The authentication part has been popped up. So I will select the user. Oh. I hope it saved the right password. Yes. And it requires the admin to approve the scope. So unless someone give me access to that, I won't be able to run this automation. So therefore, I might not be able to use it. So in this way, you can define a process which has a restricted scope. So you can create an automation that mention, hey, you can do all of them, but you can't send an email, by restricting the scope. And it will tell you at the right time, hey, what you can do and what you cannot do. Now let's cancel this, and I will stop it. And let's say that I don't ask for this mail send scope, but still I'm using the reply to email. But instead of sending the email, I'm just saving it as a draft. So this won't require, should not require a send scope. So let's see if it's working. As it's not requiring an additional scope, the whole authentication flow is not prompted again. So it's using the authentication token that we already had, that had all the permissions that we had here. So the mail send is not. Now let's see what happens if I'm not asking the send scope, but actually I'm trying to use this activity to actually send the file, to send an email.
So while this runs, Alex, I have a quick question. How can we actually separate the permissions based on user specific accounts? Can we do that on Azure?
Yes. So let me show you immediately how you can do this in Azure and also how you can do this in UiPath.
Okay.
As you expected, this failed. We had an error, an unspecified error has been occurred because in the end you didn't had the required scope in order to send the email. So in this way, you can very well restrict who can do what, or at least at the automation level. Now, to your point, Nisarg, who can send or who cannot send an email? If I'm looking here at the app level, I can, if I go to the enterprise application, I can, during the authentication part, I can also specify that, hey, just one specific user has, or a group, or a list of users have the ability to send the email. So let's take the example that just the managers are able to send emails, and the rest of the team is just able to move emails, read emails, but not saved as draft, but not actually to send the email. So you can add this user here. In this case, it's Alex Crijman at UiPath Staging. That's the email. So you can, if you would create a connection with that user, that user would be able to send the email or to reply in this scenario. So let's change the connection to one Alex Crijman connection, and let's see if now it's actually working.
And we don't have that scope selected on the app on the scope level.
Oh yeah, definitely. So that means
Yeah.
it will take the, so this is a very good point. So if you don't select here the scope, but you have the scopes already assigned to you from the app level, you will receive that scope as well. So if you add the mail send, for example, at the app level in the app registration, everybody that will make connection on the authentication token will receive the mail send scope as well. Here are the scopes that the application is required, the UiPath is requiring, not what we receive from the application. So this is a very good point. Thank you. Yeah.
So how do I know what type of scopes I have to select for which specific activity? There might be confusions because there are many scopes and many activities that we perform.
Yeah, so we made quite a work on this. So every activity has the possibility on the documentation. You can find in the documentation the scopes that are required and that we ask for. But that doesn't necessarily mean it can't work with other scopes as long as they come from the app registration. So for example, if I'm, as you saw with the reply to email, if I'm just saving it as draft, it doesn't use the send email, the send scope at all. Or if you have the site selected for the upload files, now you see sites, read, write, all have email connection, right? So this is maybe something broader, but if you would have sites selected and to access just a specific folder and you send to that specific folder, it will work. This is a way for us to help you guys to understand what are the scopes that we require, and as well you can find them in the activity as well. So if I'm unselect those scopes, you will see a warning message at the activity level. Is not an error, it's a warning message showing that those scopes are required, so something might not work or not all the functionality might work. So yeah, now let's see how would work if I don't want to upload a file in and give all those sites all permission. But let's see how the sites permission sites selected work. So if I want to give to this application the possibility just one specific site, and this I think you, Nisarg, have a really good example.
Sure. So let me quickly show how we can actually do that. So let's see how we can actually create a specific app which has access to only limited sites. And then we restrict user basically from accessing all the other sites, right? How we can do that. And for that, we have a very nice example of sites.selected. So to do that, let's create a new app again. So let's create a new app, which we call as dev types. Let's say hyphen, call it Nisarg. And this app, which we want to create, is obviously going to be a multi-tenant application because we might have data from other organization accounts as well. And let's add a redirect URL. Now this time I will use my orchestrator. So I will use the redirection URL of my orchestrator, which is, and we want to give it for OneDrive. So let's select a connector of OneDrive. And similarly, on our OneDrive for bring your own app, we need this URL. So let's go back. We give a callback URL to our application and register. Now this multi-tenant application, which we just created, let's refresh and wait for that application to be created here. I'll close this one in the meantime. Awesome. So now we have the application created. So let's go in the application while it's loading. It's kind of a slow today. It's okay. So let's go to app. Perfect. And then in Azure, we have this option called a single sign-on. So let's go to the application where we actually can see all the details. Now let's copy one by one each details which we need. So let's copy the application ID. So I'll copy right here so that we don't have any confusion. I'll copy the tenant ID required. Then we need to create one client secret. So let's create a client secret called UiPath. My favorite keyword always. So I'll just add this one. I'll just copy the client secret right here. Okay, now that I have this application created, now we need to select permissions of APIs to make sure that we give only specific access. So let's go to API permissions. In the beginning of the session, we talked about what are the application permissions. Now, this is where we will actually see how we can create that. So currently, we only have user.read permission. Let's click on add a permission. And we have Microsoft Graph. We have so many APIs permissions which you can actually select. Let's select Graph. Application permission, because this is application specific permission. I will just say sites dot, and I have all the permissions here. Now I will use the sites dot selected, which is a very nice permission, which we will use. Now, since I'm admin, I can actually grant admin access. So I admin consent, so I'll grant the admin consent to this permission and done. Now the application creation part is done. Now I have to just make sure that out of my SharePoint sites, so I have these many SharePoint sites right now. Out of these SharePoint sites, I want to give it access only to, let's say, FPH test. How do I do that? For that, I will open the developer.microsoft.com where I will use the Graph Explorer. Now let's see what all APIs we need to use in order to give only specific site access to that actual Azure application. For that, the name of the site is FPH test. So what I will do is I will simply create one API, which is like a simple API. So let's say my API is this one. I will go back and I will create a simple API, which is, instead of this, I need to enter the SharePoint site name. So my site name is this. So I'll just simply copy. Okay, FPH capital test. I'll say FPH underscore test, and I'll run a query. And this is my site ID. So we need a site ID. So let's copy the site ID. Now, what else we need? Let's go back and save our site ID here as well. This is our site ID. Now for our site ID, what do we need is basically going back, we need to give permission of that application to access this specific site ID. So that means we need a post API. And the API which we require is a simple one. So the API is pretty straightforward, where we have HTTPS graph sites. We just need to enter the site ID along with permissions. So the site ID that we just copied is this one. So let's pick up the site ID, enter it here. What I'm doing is I'm giving that specific site ID, and now I need to provide the payload data since it's a POST API. The payload data is in format of JSON. So I'll just copy the JSON, and the JSON requires your ID and the name of the application. So ID is nothing but our app ID.
This looks very complicated.
It's not that complicated. It's a little bit simple when we just use 3 APIs. But yes, on Azure side, it is a little complicated. And now we give the application name, and here we go, run. 201. 201 is success. Don't
worry, guys. We are gonna give you the exact steps for you guys to do this as well.
Yes.
Just stay until the end.
Now that we give the access, we can see the response where we have dev types Nisarg application access given to this specific SharePoint site. And how do we know that? Which all applications are using this specific SharePoint site? So just change from post to get, remove the payload, and keep the same API and run it. And then you can see for the FPH side, you can actually see all the applications which are accessing my specific site. And do we have our application name? Yes, we do. Dev types Nisarg. Perfect. Now that we know we have given access of this app to only FPH test, let's go to the documents and check if we have any data here. Yes, we do have one data. We have one image. Okay. Now, what do? Let's go to our UiPath and try to create a connection with this specific app which we want to connect to. So the same way, we will use the bring your own app method. Since we have given already the redirect URL, let's go to our data, which we just copied. This is our app ID. And this is our client secret, which we just copied. I hope it's the correct one. And let's connect. And select the account once. And that's all. So I won't actually select all of this, won't give consent. I'll just say accept because I just want to give one permission, which is site.selected. And it's done. As simple as that. So we just created a connection with the the app which we created for the OneDrive. And now let's try to test it if it actually works in UiPath. So I have a simple code. And in this code, I'm using the classic activity of Microsoft 365. I will use a connection method of properties. So in the properties, I have entered the app ID. So let's try to get the app ID. So this is our app ID for the app which we just created. So let's update the app ID. We need a tenant ID. Now we did not copy that. Let's go back to our app. And here we get the tenant ID, same on the overview page, right? So go back, enter the tenant ID as well. And then we need the application secret, which is the same one which we just copied to create the connection. And perfect, done. Now, since I have given the properties to the Microsoft 365 scope, I will, let's say, try to download the file which is already existing in the site of FPH. So let's copy the link from here, copy, and let's try to check if we can actually get this data. Okay, now I will check first. Data folder is empty. Let's try to run this one. Now, what we have done is we have given only specific access of FPH site, SharePoint site to this particular Azure app. Now, let's see when it runs, it's able to download the specific file or no. It is running now and it will complete. Okay, perfect. It completed. Yes, we did download the image, which was there on the FPH site. Now, simply what do we need to do? Let's try to see if we can actually download data from some other SharePoint site. So let's go back. Let's go to some other SharePoint site and try to see, let's go to integration UiPath. Do we have any documents here? Yes, we do have. This is image. So let's copy this link. Perfect. And now let's see if I can download the image from other SharePoint site, which we haven't provided access to our app. Let's try to run the file. What is the expected output? we should not be able to download the file from that specific app. And that's what happened. So we were given issue saying that access denied, which means now our Azure app is accessing only specific site, which we have given as site.selected. What did we use for that? We use application permission, and that's how we actually controlled our access level on the app of Azure.
So you've seen, guys, the application permissions and also delegated permissions. Our suggestion is whenever you're using an email, might be a delegated permission better, but when it comes to manipulating files around SharePoint sites, maybe an application permission could be better, as long as you don't want to impersonate a user and just to manage those files.
So here, since Alex, I use Microsoft 365 Scope, I have a quick question. So recently, what I have seen and observed is that today integration services actually just support delegate permissions, right? Authentication. Will it actually support application permissions also, and the Microsoft 365 Scope's connectivity activities as well?
At some point, yes. So we are working. This is something that we that's a feature that we will work on, and we are working on. So a lot of customers ask for the application permission for integration service. So you will have under the gear button also the ability to select application permission connections. And on the other side, on the scope, you already had application permissions as Nisarg already configured. But if you want to use the new activities, the connection activities, this will also come in place using the asset and the runtime asset. So you will be able to use application permissions, delegated permissions, single tenant app registration, and as well multi-tenant applications. So I hope with this we gave you like a brief of all the things that you can do when it comes to authentication, and how you can restrict the scopes, the permission based on the user, based on the sites. And I hope we made a bit more clear in your mind when to use one or the other. And I hope this will help you guys in your conversations with your IT admin. So at the end, we have like a small quiz because we know that there was a lot of information that we offer you in terms and names. So let's see if we all understood the same things. So Christina.
Yes, so I will invite everyone now for the second part of our quiz. It's a new QR code, so you will enter a new quiz room. I will leave this on screen again for about 30 seconds for you to join the quiz room. And yeah.
Am I allowed to join, Christina?
What?
Am I allowed to join?
Well, since there's nothing to win, yes, but you will as the results. I will just give the second code again in the chat also, so you guys know if you want to enter from your laptops.
And meanwhile, also Anastasia shared with you guys the details related to our bonus information, bonus guide for how to set up the site selected, where you can find the asset format in our documentation. And in that document, you will find also some references from Microsoft that should help you to cover your conversation with the admins and IT admins when it comes to the admin consents and approvals.
Let us know in the chat whether you managed to enter the quiz room. So we know to switch screens from the QR code and to start the quiz. Okay, Vidi. Thank you. Well, you have the link here, and the code is 637494424. So you can also join by that code. I will switch now to the quiz. And let's see, we have 8 players in the quiz room.
And meanwhile, while we are waiting, guys, we are reaching up to the Q&A. So if you have additional questions, or if you have questions, don't hesitate to unmute yourself and ask them.
Okay, let's start the quiz then, because we'll dive into the Q&A straight after this. Which authentication type is not encouraged for connecting to Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace? And you have here 4 options given by our colleagues and 20 seconds to answer. Okay, let's see. Okay, so we have 2 correct answers. We can go back a bit to this if Alex wants to see the results.
Okay. So even Microsoft is not encouraging the username and password. So you know, guys. So what they recommend, it's all the time to use now app registration. So with the client secret or client certificate. Nisar, do you know why they are not encouraging any more username and password?
They're forcing more and more on single sign-on users to use SSO. But while we want to actually use SSO, we need to make sure that we are connecting or authenticating via more secured environment rather just using a password. So that's where when we actually try to use Microsoft 365 Scope and the applications of it, we always prefer to use the authentications created by AD apps or more secured ones so that we can use SSO.
On the other side, people just can steal the username and password.
Yes.
Okay, we'll move to the next, yeah?
Yes, let's go to the next one.
Okay, this is the leaderboard for the first bit. And this is the second question out of 3. Okay. When configuring Microsoft 365 scope using the asset method, what is the purpose of determining the necessary scopes? 4 answer options. 20 seconds again.
This is the one which Alex just showed in the demo.
This is like a short knowledge check, depending on the presentation you just business.
But it's not a batching. I think the quiz was not.
The quiz was not correct.
The quiz was not correct, but it was not for batching. It is indeed to streamline the authentication.
But he was the correct option, indeed, yeah?
Maybe that was marked wrong. But yeah, the option 4 people are actually correct to streamline the authentication process. Yeah.
Yes, that's good. Great.
Okay, we'll move to the next.
It gives you also the others. So security and access to SharePoint folders in SharePoint. That's true as well.
Okay, and this is the last question for today's knowledge check. In the context of Microsoft 365 authentication, what is the purpose of the site selected scope?
The last one which we just saw.
Let's see if the quiz has the right answer.
The right answers were given by you, and I have the message to prove it. Was it right?
It's correct. It's actually to restrict the access or limit the access on the specific single site, which is the first option, which is the correct one.
Yeah. So in this way, you can specify, as you saw, which are the SharePoint sites that an application, in this case, our activities, have access or doesn't have access. So yeah, great.
Just to add on to this point, so this was actually a very important automation which we recently created for one of our biggest enterprise account, and the one which uses site.selected was actually the main core requirement of it. And then when I actually explored it and I saw it's required by majority of the community users and enterprise application users who are using Microsoft 365. So now you have a complete guide, step-by-step guide to create that.
Yeah.
Okay, I will stop sharing screen now and I will ask you maybe, Alex, if you can share the deck again so we go into Q&A.
Definitely. Where is my deck? Here's my deck.
The deck with the slide for Q&A. And at this point, let me check if everyone is allowed to unmute. Okay, everyone is allowed to unmute. So please just open up your mics and start dropping questions to Alex or Nisarg. I've seen some questions in the chat, but I think Nisarg already answered to those. But if there's anything left that was unanswered or you have a new question, this is the high time to ask it.
So first of all, thank you. This is like a really great session, and I just have one questions around. So like, in your experience, when should we use the integration service and when should we use the in scope, or is it based on the permissions that we need, or
Yeah, so as long as you have the possibility to connect to the cloud, so to the UiPath cloud, our suggestion always is going to be to use the integration service. If you have an automation to implement on-premise, because you don't have integration service, that's why we created the scope. The reason behind having and encouraging for you guys to use the integration service way is because it's more secure. Integration service encrypts all the data, app registration details, connection tokens. They don't use them, and as well, you have the ability to use the triggers, like email triggers, email received, email sent, file updated, file created, etc. On the other side, if you are using the scope, you don't have the ability to use the triggers. And also you don't have a good management of connections comparing to the integration service. So for example, is the refresh token. On the scope, the robot, when the robot runs, it refreshes the token. But on the other side, so for example, if the robot doesn't run for 2 months, then that refresh token won't be alive. So that means you will have to go again in that robot or re-authenticate, and the robot will work for another 30 days until again a gap of more than 30 days will go on, and you will need to do that again. On the other side, if you have the integration service makes sure that all the time that refresh token is up to date. So you never need to go in that unattended robot and make the authentication.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if we have any other questions. We had one regarding the slides and the recording, and yes, this will be shared after the event, as they always are on the event link. And the deck, you will get it, I think. It will appear in your inbox by Saturday. But tomorrow you can find both the deck and the recording on the event link. Right. So, any other questions?
Don't be shy.
I think we're a bit over the hour, but still, I mean, we can take 5 minutes if you have some left questions.
It's not always we get to meet Alex live. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask the questions right now.
Or if you have features that you want to have in the platform, now is the time for you guys to ask.
I also shared earlier both Nisarg and Alex's LinkedIn profiles, so you can connect with them on LinkedIn. No,
I already answered one question on chat, Alex, but if you want to add on to this question, so Vidhi asked question earlier that can we add and remove permissions from Azure? So, I mean, I have a subsequent question on that. If we remove certain permission from Azure, how does it impact our automations in production?
So, so imagine if you remove the permissions in Azure, then the robot, when it's going to use them, they might not have those permissions, so therefore they will fail. But if they had already the token, it will use that token as long as it is valid. But when they will need to make the refresh, they will ask again for the scope. So it will be a conflict at that point.
Ah, got it. And if we have given that app access to a specific user group, if I add a new user to that group, will that user automatically get access to that app?
Yes. Yes.
Amazing.
Okay, I just shared again the bonus guides, the information shared earlier by our colleague Mihai. So don't forget to copy paste these links before you go out of this session today to have them. And I see we have another question, Alex from Vangel. Says not a question, but just wanted to say that the quiz at the end is very useful, at least for me. When it comes to technicalities, there's a lot of information fed to us through these webinars. I think that having a quiz at the end, the webinar helps us retain pieces of the information from the presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. This is a good point and a good feedback for us.
Yeah, great feedback. Maybe we'll try to implement it for every dev dive session.
Next time we will make more. We'll add more quizzes.
Yes.
We were fear that you would do one less.
No, maybe we can say that next time we will add a price, and that would be more motivating. Yeah.
We have a question, Alex, from Billian. Is the JSON only format which is used for authentication?
Yes, just so in the asset, the only possibility to add is as a JSON. So the JSON format is you can find it in the documentation, and it gives you an example of it. But I think your question is referring to something else. Belian, if you want to unmute yourself, or I hope I answered you.
Yeah,
William,
you
do you wish
answered.
to ask that? Okay.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes.
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 Yeah, I was just asking whether JSON is the only format used when accessing the credentials.
Yes. Yeah, so we created one single format, so for you to be able to set all the values in the and then to transform it as a text, so you can pass it in the asset, and then the activity to understand it and take those configurations.
All right.
In the runtime asset, again, you can use the credentials, a credential asset. But if in the design time, you can use just a normal text asset.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Okay. I think we can close it here. Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you very much, Nisarg. I will let Anastasia say if she wants to say a few words.
No, I think it was a great session. Thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you guys will join other Dev Dive sessions.
Thank you very much, everybody. I hope you
See
like
you.
it, and you can find the link tomorrow.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
See you in April. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.